This video will show you how to replace the front steering knuckle on a GMC Sierra 2500. This will be located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the front end of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. Once you've done that, if you have a hubcap, we're going to remove that. That can be done using a 22mm socket. After that, we'll remove all 8 of our 22mm lug nuts as well so we can remove the wheel. Now that we have the wheel off, let's have a close look in the center area here. We have a metal cover. We're going to dislodge this so we can make our way behind to our axle nut. For this, I'm just using a small hammerable pry bar. I want to make my way in between this area so I can separate it. There's our cover. Just a quick inspection of that. We'll set it aside. We're using a 36mm for our axle nut. There's that. Once you have removed the nut and its washer, continue on with a hammer and punch directly in the center of the front axle. I've used some penetrant to help break this free. Now, once you do have movement from the axle in comparison to the wheel bearing, we'll continue on. Now, up along the top of the knuckle, this is where we can see our ABS wheel speed sensor wire from the wheel bearing, and this is leading all the way up across the top of the upper control arm, and you're going to find it makes its way behind the front wheel well. Up along the top of the frame is where you're going to find an electrical connector. We're going to carefully dislodge it, then we're going to have to separate the electrical connector from the frame and continue on down along this way. Now, as I make my way up and along the top of the frame here, I can feel where my electrical connector is. I'm just carefully pulling up on my locking tab and I'm pressing the wiring harness away. Of course, a quick inspection along each end for corrosion is extremely important. Continuing on, we're going to separate the connector from the frame next. Gently pry it up and out of the frame. Now, sometimes the mounting point will break off. That's okay. We can try to remove that or use a wire tie as necessary. As we make our way down, we have another mounting point. Pry that out of place as well. Let's continue making our way outward up along the top of the control arm. We have another mounting point. I'm just going to use a small flat blade screwdriver for this. The locking tab is inside of this area, so I'm using a small screwdriver. We're just going to make our way in, gently pry to separate that. Inspection of that. This is looking good. Now we're just going to pry this off of this metal bracket. Let's set this cable aside. Right in the same area, we're going to dislodge the bracket, which is part of our brake flex hose. We have a 10mm mounting bolt. Quick inspection of that. Now the next thing we want to do is start removing our caliper from this area. If you were looking along the back side of the caliper, you're going to find that you have 2 bolts holding the caliper bracket to the knuckle. We're going to be using a 21mm for each of these. As for these bolts, let's fully remove the upper one. Just give it a quick inspection and start it back in a couple threads. With that started in a couple threads, we can fully remove the next mounting bolt. Now we're holding onto the caliper as we remove that mounting bolt. We should be able to slide this away from our brake rotor. Once you do have it pulled away from the brake rotor, pay attention to the brake pads, making sure they are still in good usable order. We're going to hang this aside, putting no pressure on our flex hose. Let's remove that brake rotor next. Let's make our way to the outer tie rod end next. You can see we have a 21mm mounting nut holding it in place to our steering knuckle. Once you've removed that mounting nut, just start it back on a couple threads. Go ahead and use a little penetrant here and we'll continue on with a hammer. We're going to cause vibration directly on our knuckle. You can see the tie rod end drop down. Go ahead and remove that mounting nut, separate the tie rod end, give it a close inspection. Make sure it's still in good usable order and we're setting that aside. At this point, we can pivot the steering knuckle as necessary. Now, as we make our way along the back side of the knuckle, this is where we can see 4 mounting bolts. We have 2 along one side and 2 along the other side of the knuckle. These 15mm headed mounting bolts are holding the wheel bearing to our steering knuckle. There's our first mounting bolt. It's my next mounting bolt. Now for this mounting bolt, since I intend on working the bolts from the backside here to drive out the wheel bearing, I'm starting in this lower bolt, just a few threads here. Now, of course, I do still have to make my way over to the other side, remove my other 2 mounting bolts, and I'm going to leave one on that side in a few threads as well. Now, as I mentioned, I have to drive the wheel bearing out from this side. I'm going to be using my air hammer with a specialty bit on the end of my bolt. I have them in several threads because I don't want to damage the bolts. We are going to be reusing them. Now we are getting some movement on this side. We'll use some penetrant, and then we'll make our way over to the other side. We're going to attempt to rock this bearing out of position. Let's get that bolt out of there. We already got the other side out. At this point, we can start removing that bearing. We have our axle nut in place, so we're going to remove that. We'll start removing the bearing and that backing plate. We can slide both of these off of here. Continuing on, we should be able to remove the backing plate from the bearing itself. Just a quick inspection of that, we'll set it aside. A quick inspection and we'll set this aside. With the bearing out of position, let's have a close look in the center circular port here. Now you're going to find that you have a circular rubber gasket that makes its way all the way around and it's sitting in a groove in the knuckle itself. We're going to be reusing this gasket. So for this, I'm going to gently pull it out of place. I'm just using a small screwdriver. You can use a pick, whatever you have handy. We'll clean this up, make sure it's not torn, worn, or damaged. If it is, you're going to have to replace it. Now we're using an 18mm to start removing our upper ball joint mounting nut. Now, this isn't necessarily a common issue. Sometimes when you're attempting to loosen the mounting nut, the stud will break free from inside of the knuckle. In which case, as you start loosening this, the ball joint stud is only going to spin on you. Other times, it's stuck in the knuckle, which is actually preferable, so we can fully remove the mounting nut. Now, with all that said, I'm going to apply downward pressure on that upper control arm and the ball joint, forcing it into my knuckle while I continue loosening my mounting nut. Now, as I mentioned, typically the ball joint stud would still be stuck inside the steering knuckle. What you would want to do in that instance would be to loosen the nut, leave it on a couple threads, and then use a hammer and start tapping on the knuckle in this area. The vibration should help break this free. Now, as we start releasing this, we're going to find that the steering knuckle will want to pull out and away from the vehicle. You want to be careful this does not hurt you. Now we're making our way down to the lower ball joint next. Down in this area, we're going to start removing the ball joint mounting nut. Now on my application, I do have a locking cotter pin holding this in position, so I'm going to remove that. Typically, you would just replace these. Now, something to think about here. As you start removing this mounting nut, it's the last thing holding the steering knuckle to the vehicle. So you need to hold on to the knuckle. Do not let it go until you've fully removed it so it does not fall down and potentially hurt you. We're leaving the mounting nut on a couple threads. Now, just as with the upper ball joint, you may need to tap on the steering knuckle, causing vibration to allow this to come down. We have a hammer, a couple taps here. A quick inspection of the hardware here. Go ahead and start sliding that out and away. There it is, friend. Prior to installation of any brand new part, let's clean and inspect our mounting areas. We have an upper and a lower ball joint. We'll clean and inspect the mounting studs, and of course make sure that the boot is still in good usable order. It's not torn, worn, or damaged. This looks good. Onto the lower ball joint, same process here. This looks good as well. And as far as this axle, we're going to go ahead and clean up this area. We'll give it a close inspection. During the installation process, we will be using anti-seize on the splined area, but let's wait on that for now and continue on with the installation. Now it's time for installation of our brand new front steering knuckle. As we get this in position, we're making sure that the axle goes through the center circular port. We'll also make sure that we align the lower ball joint stud with its lower port on the knuckle itself. Now, while I'm holding in this position, we have our mounting nut. Go ahead and start that on there. We'll bottom that out. We'll pivot this and align our upper ball joint stud with the upper port. You're going to have to flex the upper control arm down towards the knuckle. I'm using a pry bar for this. While applying downward pressure, we can start installing the upper ball joint mounting nut. Now to tighten this, typically you will have to hold downward pressure on the upper control arm. Once you have it bottomed out, torque it to 37 foot-pounds. Torque wrench, 37 foot-pounds. Time to torque the lower ball joint next. For the lower ball joint mounting nut, we're going to bottom this out. We'll be torquing it to 37 foot-pounds. After you have it torqued to 37 foot-pounds, you need to continue tightening it an additional 130 degrees. Now, once you have that tightened to specification, we're going to install our locking cotter pin. As you can see, we have a slotted mounting nut. We need to make sure that the slots on the nut align with the port on the stud itself. If it's not properly aligned to install the cotter pin, you need to continue tightening until the very next slot is. We have our locking cotter pin. Slide it right on through. Once you have that slid through, the next thing you have to do is peen it over so there's no way this mounting nut can loosen up on you while you're driving down the road. At this point, we're going to continue on with our sealing O-ring. Let's lubricate it with some silicone paste. Just work that around with gloved fingers here. Now we can get this in place into the steering knuckle. You can see the exact area that it needs to rest into. Once you feel as though you have it in place, double check to make sure it's seated all the way around. After we've cleaned everything, let's continue on with anti-seize. We're going to use anti-seize on the splined area of the axle that we just finished cleaning. And then I also like to use anti-seize inside the circular port. Let's go right along the edge there. After you get inside of the circular port, we're going to go along the outer edge area. The next thing we need to do is clean and inspect our backing plate. Now, after cleaning each side of the backing plate, let's continue on with having a look at the bearing. After cleaning the backing plate, have a close look along the back side of the bearing. You need to make sure you clean the mounting point here as well. I'm going to be replacing my bearing. The next thing we'll do is clean and inspect all 4 of our wheel bearing mounting bolts. I've cleaned the threads and applied some blue thread locker. Let's install our backing plate. Once you have that in place and the proper orientation, it's time to install the wheel bearing. As for that wheel bearing, we're taking it and we're sliding it towards the backing plate and our steering knuckle. It's sliding onto the axle. As far as the bearing's concerned, we want to make sure we have that in the proper orientation as well. The ABS wheel speed sensor wire would be up along the top of the bearing. It slides into this port here. Once you have everything lined up, let's continue on along the back side with our 4 mounting bolts. That's 2. Let's do the same on the other side. I have all the bolts started in. Now we're going to snug these up in a crisscross manner. After that, we'll be torquing each of them to 133 foot-pounds. As for torquing these bolts, once you have the bearing completely bottomed out, you can continue on torquing them in a circular manner if necessary. There's our first 2. Let's do the same on the other side. The next thing we need to do is attach the outer tie rod end to our steering knuckle. Go ahead and press that up into position and we'll start on our mounting nut. Once you have that started on, snug it up and torque it to 44 foot-pounds. There we are. We'll use some copper anti-seize on the hub mating surface. Now it's time for the brake rotor. To hold this in position, I'm using my axle nut as a spacer and my lug nut to hold it on there. Before we bring the caliper into position, let's make sure we have the ABS wheel speed sensor wire in the proper positioning. We don't want it down here where it could get damaged by our caliper. We're going to bring it right up along the top of this area, just behind the backing plate. We'll rest it in this area. Continue on with your caliper. As for that caliper, we're going to bring it over the brake rotor. We'll slide it into place, start in each one of our 2 mounting bolts. Now before I get my bolts in place, let's just have a quick look at our brake flex hose. What we're paying attention to is to confirm it's not twisted in some way that might restrict the brake fluid flow. This could happen if you are bringing the caliper over and you turned it in some way. Now it's time for our 2 caliper bracket mounting bolts. I've cleaned the threads. Let's continue on with installing these. We're going to torque them to 229 foot-pounds. With the caliper in position, the brake rotor can't go anywhere. We can remove the lug nut and our spacer. Let's pay attention to our brake flex hose next. Up along the top of the steering knuckle, you can tell that the brake flex hose bracket has a small alignment tab, and then of course we have a port on the knuckle and on that bracket for our mounting bolt. We'll just start in our mounting bolt and snug it up. It's time to secure that ABS wire next. We'll slide that into its locking clip. Make our way over here now. You can see exactly where it needs to fit into. Press that in. Let's make our way up and behind here next. As we make our way under here, there's going to be 2 mounting points for our ABS wire. You'll find that you have a small circular port here. That's for the first mounting point. It's just going to line up and slide right in. There we are. The next mounting point is going to be right up along the top. Obviously, from under here, it's fairly difficult to see. Generally, you can just feel around. You're going to find another circular port, line it up, and press that in. Let's get this connected. Press it in, listen for a click, double check to make sure it's secured so you do not get an ABS wheel speed sensor light. It's time for the axle nut. We'll start with our washer. Start on this axle nut. I'm going to use a pry bar. We'll come across the studs down towards the ground at an angle. That's going to prevent this from turning on us. Now when we tighten this axle nut, we have to do it by hand. You don't want to use an impact tool, which could cause damage to the bearing. We'll snug this up and then we'll torque it. I have it bottomed out, so I'm going to torque this to 188 foot-pounds. Once you have that axle nut torqued to specification, it's time for the protective cover. We'll tap this in place using a rubber mallet. Double check to make sure it's sealed all the way around. Now one last quick inspection in this area and we can reinstall our wheel. Now it's time to reinstall that wheel. Once you have the wheel in place, start on all 8 of your 22mm lug nuts. We're going to lightly bottom them out. We'll get the wheel safely back down on the ground and then torque each of them to 140 foot-pounds. Now I've got the wheel back on the ground. Let's go ahead and torque each of these lug nuts to 140 foot-pounds in a crisscross manner. Torqued. If you have a center cover, install that now. We'll get this in place. We're using our 22mm socket to lightly bottom these out. Double check to make sure it's secured in place. Okay friend, we finished our installation. Now the next thing you want to do is take your vehicle for a road test. Make sure you have no ABS light and get yourself a 4-wheel alignment. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.